Let's talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He has lost his residency case in New York, which means he's being booted off the ballot in the state. The case was brought forward by a Democrat aligned super PAC, and they claim Robert F. Kennedy Jr. falsely claimed residency in New York on his candidacy filing papers. And because of this, even though he collected all of the signatures needed to be on the ballot in the state, which was thousands upon thousands of signatures, he would be ineligible for essentially a clerical error. So let's go over a few of the details. And then after hearing the details of the case, you might come to the same conclusion that I've come to, which is, yeah, okay, he probably doesn't really live in the state of New York. But first of all, why does New York care? I mean, he's paying taxes there. That's usually all a state cares about. If any state should be twisted up about it, it would be California because, of course, they would want to be the ones collecting taxes from him. So because this isn't a tax case and this is a candidacy for not even New York office, but for federal office, I don't really understand how this disqualifies him to be on the ballot. It's clearly political. So here's the story from the AP that describes the judge's reasoning. And then we're going to hear what RFK Jr. has to say as his defense to this. So the judge, who may or may not be a liberal judge, it's a little unclear, and I didn't really look up her voting history, but she has basically said that, look, you tried to scam everybody. You don't really live in New York. So they're claiming, according to this AP article, that he falsely claimed a New York residence on nominating petitions despite living in the state of California. It says that in New York, Judge Christina Ryba concluded in her 34-page decision that the rented bedroom Kennedy claimed as his residence in New York wasn't a bona fide and legitimate residence, but merely a sham address that he assumed for the purpose of maintaining his voter registration and furthering his political candidacy. What's really weird about that, first of all, in New York, it's very common to rent a room. Oftentimes, that's all the space that there is. And so New York, it's common to live in just a room. People aren't renting entire apartments. Certainly, they don't have houses in New York. It's not common, okay? So, yeah, he's a wealthy guy. He's a Kennedy. Does it make sense that he's renting a room in the state of New York when he clearly could buy his own apartment or buy himself a house or something? I mean, okay, but that's not up to a judge. That might be something you and I decide, well, that seems kind of absurd, but that's not really up to the law to decide on what type of residence an individual should maintain for themselves. If a person wants to just rent a room in the city of New York, then that's what they could do. So she's saying, okay, but this is a sham address. So he was claiming that he was still renting a room in New York. He lives in California, in Los Angeles, not far from me, in a much nicer neighborhood, in a big house, I would assume, considering the area. And he says that he was keeping a room in New York. He's claimed when he was in court, it was a 5-day court appearance, he claimed that he was renting a room since 2014. Now, the judge saying that he just had this sham address that he assumed for the purpose of maintaining his voter registration and furthering his political candidacy? Was he looking at running for president back in 2014, 2015, 2016? I mean, are these political ambitions that he has put out there? I don't think he's ever indicated that he wanted to run for president up until the COVID pandemic. So if he maintained a residence, if he was renting a room in New York, I mean, he was renting a room in New York. A lot of people continue to do that because they don't want to give up their New York residency. So, but she says, given the size and appearance of the spare bedroom, as shown in the photographs admitted into evidence, the court finds Kennedy's testimony that he may return to that bedroom to reside with his wife, family members, multiple pets, and all of his personal belongings to be highly improbable, if not preposterous, the judge wrote. Now, Kennedy didn't claim that he was going to go move back into that one-bedroom apartment or that one bedroom in a house. He just said that he eventually wanted to move back to New York with his family and all of his belongings, that he maintained residence in New York because he had been a New Yorker for a long time before he married Cheryl Hines, and he was expecting that he would return with his wife and kids. I mean, with his wife and his exotic animals and all of his belongings. He wasn't saying he's going to move back into that one bedroom. My guess is they would buy a house at that point. But again, you're allowed to move inside of a state and still maintain residence in that state. So this is kind of getting a little absurd. So Ryba said evidence submitted into trial showed Kennedy had a long-standing pattern of borrowing addresses from friends and relatives so he could maintain his voter registration in New York State while actually residing in California, where he has a home with his wife. Curb Your Enthusiasm actor Cheryl Hines, saying, quote, using a friend's address for political and voting purposes while barely stepping foot on the premises does not equate to residency under the election law, the judge wrote. Told otherwise would establish a dangerous precedent and open the door to the fraud and political mischief that the election law residency rules were designated to prevent. There are plenty of people who live in New York, but who claim New York residency, but they live in Florida. I mean, this is actually kind of common. Again, if the state's collecting taxes, that's usually the only thing that matters. Clear Choice Action is the Democratic-aligned political action committee that backed the legal challenge. So this is a Democrat super PAC that's just trying to oust him they're just trying to oust him. That's all that they're wanting to do. They don't care about where he lives. I mean, this is just, they're looking for something to get him off the ballot. So Kennedy says that he had rented a room in a house. It was like $500 a month, which is really low. Barbara Moss is the one he claimed that he was renting from. She acknowledged that there's no written lease and that Kennedy's first payment wasn't made until after the New York Post published a story casting doubt on Kennedy's claim that he lived at this address. So the judge also heard from a longtime friend of Kennedy who said the candidate had regularly been an overnight guest at his own Westchester home from 2014 to 2017, but he was not a tenant there, as Kennedy had claimed. So, okay. Ryba, the judge, said that his testimony that none of the furniture or decor in the room belonged to him, while Hines and his wide assortment of domestic and exotic pets remained across the country, was compelling evidence that he didn't intend to remain at the Katona address. All right. So, yeah, he doesn't live in New York. I mean, look, maybe he doesn't have a lease in New York. He wasn't paying rent in New York. He was kind of going to friends' houses and staying there. He started paying Barbara Moss $500 in order to cover for the fact that he doesn't really have a residence in New York, even though he was maintaining tax records in New York and driver's license in New York and all. Yeah, he doesn't really live in New York. I mean, it's pretty clear that he doesn't really live there. But I still don't understand how that disqualifies him from being on the ballot for a federal election. That is a clerical error. It seems like the state of New York should say, all right, so the address on your filing's wrong. You just need to update your address. You're allowed to not be a New York resident in order to be on the New York ballot for the presidency. New York, Trump is not a New York resident. He's a Florida resident. Kamala Harris is a California resident. You don't have to be a New York resident to be on the ballot. So for them to be kicking him off the ballot for this clerical error, when they could just say, all right, you just have to update your address, that is the only thing that should happen here. It really, the only reason why he wanted to claim a New York address is to circumvent this odd kind of rule that triggers if both the president and the vice president are from the same state. So you're not supposed to be from the same state. It's not, there's just a rule in the elections, I believe it's in the Constitution, that actually makes it, it's not that it can't be done, it makes it very difficult to be done. Well, I think I'd have to research a little bit more. I almost want to say you can have yourself and a candidate from the same state on a ticket. There's nothing preventing you from that, but you can't win. The minute you win, you both can't be from the same state. It might be something along those lines. But there's something in the election that made him want to change his address in order to circumvent the fact that Nicole Shanahan is also from California. All right, so what? Clerical error shouldn't kick him off the ballot. Maybe he needs to choose a new running mate. The problem with this case is that now other states are going to look at this, and he's petitioned, on his petition in other states, he's got the New York address, and the same sort of Democrat super PACs could certainly go after him in all these other states. I'm sure they will, and they'll get kicked off the ballot for a clerical error. Again, I mean, this is just so anti-democratic, and they're claiming, oh, we're all about democracy. No, you're not. You're not about democracy at all. You're trying to get candidates removed. Here's what JFK had to, RFK Jr., JFK, we rose him from the dead just to get his take on this, guys, because it's so ludicrous. No, here's RFK Jr. Here he is. This is before the ruling, but he's explaining his side as to why he thinks he is still a New Yorker. Watch this.
A 5-day trial where one of the DNC cutouts is suing the campaign in New York because they say I'm not really a New Yorker, as I claimed on the ballot. petitions. I've been a New Yorker for 50 years. Since I was 10 years old, I moved to the state. My dad ran for Senate after my uncle was killed in 1964. I voted in New York for 50 years. My law license is in New York. My law office is in New York. I pay income taxes in New York. My driver's license is from New York. My car is registered in New York. My hunting license, my fishing license, my falconry license are in New York. And I've always claimed New York residence. And Cheryl and I moved out to California in 2014 to support Cheryl, who could not move at that time. One of us had to. We both agreed at that point that when she was done acting there, that she'd come back to New York and we'd move back to New York. And maybe she would do Broadway or whatever. But I always kept New York residence because I love New York. It's part of who I am. It's part of my identity. And it was important to me to keep it. And when we checked with the attorneys at the beginning of when we started the ballot registration drive and ran this problem by them, the attorneys said that if I claim California, I never voted there. My car's registered my driver's license from out of state, my law license, everything is out of state, that the DNC was going to sue us for fraud. So I claim New York, which is my residence. And now we're
Okay, so he's saying that he's got all of his stuff there: his license, his driver's license, his falconry license, he's paying taxes there. This is really going to get him in trouble, guys. This is not good. California's going to start coming after him. I can pretty much guarantee that this state is like the mob, so they're going to say, no, you know what? We're pretty sure you actually live here in the state of California and you've been paying taxes in the state of New York. And they're going to maybe use this. This is going to result in a world of hurt, because I'll tell you what, I've lived in a lot of states in this country, including New York State. And California Tax Franchise Board is not to be messed with. The IRS is so much easier to work with. Every single state tax board is so much easier to work with, except for the state of California. So I worry a little bit that now that this has come out, California is going to go after them for taxes, and that could result in a little bit of a problem. So, but besides, so he's going to be he's going to be in a world of hurt. If he were to win the presidency, you absolutely know they're going to go after him for everything and anything, like they've done to Donald Trump. This isn't going to be good. I do think that I don't think he's a New York resident for real. And I've moved all around the country. I know what it's like wanting to maintain residence in one state for whatever reason while you live in another state. I've attempted to do it from time to time. It doesn't really work out. You kind of have to, if you're spending a certain amount of time, like over 6 months, there's rules even in California. If you've been in California for over a certain amount of time, a year, then you are a California resident. You have to pay taxes in California. You have to get a driver's license in California. There was a period of time, I can tell you a story. I even tried to keep my car registered for Idaho when I moved here to California. They towed my car. The state of California, the cops saw my car parked outside for about a year, and then they just towed it. And they said, look, you have to be registered in the state of California. Your car needs to be registered in the state of California. That's how states' laws work. But beside that, that's something he could deal with when it comes to California, dealing with them. But when it comes to his candidacy, this to me just seems like a clerical error. They should just be able to correct the address. It really shouldn't have anything to do with his eligibility to run for president in the state of New York. But they're instead using this clerical error to kick him off the ballot. And that is the grossest part about this story. The gross part about this story is the fact that this Democrat-backed super PAC decides to go after the guy for the clerical error just to get him off the ballot, because they're afraid that he's going to take votes away from Kamala Harris and she's going to lose. That is what they're afraid of. And they should be afraid of that, because who likes Kamala Harris? She was suddenly thrusted on us and we're supposed to vote for him, and people are, as long as she just doesn't talk, then maybe the vote blue no matter who crowd will decide to, if she hides in the basement the way Joe Biden did in 2020, that strategy might work for her to some degree, but the independents are not going to be voting for her. They would rather vote for RFK Jr., and she knows that, and independents are going to be the ones who actually throw the vote. This is a statement from the Kennedy campaign. They put this out after the ruling, saying, that they are going to appeal. They said the Democrats are showing contempt for democracy. They aren't confident they can win at the ballot box, so they're trying to stop voters from having a choice. We will appeal and we will win. Judge Ryba openly in court said she refused to consider the constitutionality of the New York residency requirement under the 12th Amendment. It says the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution governs the residency of presidential and vice presidential candidates, not state law, said campaigning senior counsel Paul Rossi. We intend to pursue injunctive relief in the Southern District of New York. If state court judges are going to ignore the Constitution, the federal courts must step in to protect voters' rights. So it is a 12th Amendment issue that has to do with the residency of the president and the vice presidential candidates. And yeah, the state of New York doesn't have any governance over that 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So if the U.S. Constitution wants to take up some beef, if there's some issue with Kennedy and Shanahan being both from the state of California, or if they want to contest Kennedy's residency in the state of New York, it would be for the reason of the presidency and the vice presidency being from the same state. That is something that election law would handle. It isn't up to the state to boot a candidate off the ballot because they have the wrong address on their petitions. It doesn't disqualify him from running for president. He is a natural-born U.S. citizen, so that's all he needs, and he's of age, and so that's all that needs to happen. So we'll see how the appeals go. There was another attempt, actually, to kick him off the ballot in North Carolina. It was for a little bit of a different reason, but that actually was defeated by the Kennedy campaign, so he's not going to be kicked off the ballot in North Carolina. So he got one win there, but then he got the loss in New York. He's going to fight that. We'll follow it and see how that. We'll keep following it and see what happens there. All right, America, listen up. The world is getting more unpredictable by the day. We've got assassination attempts, rumors of civil war, an unstable stock market, and now the looming threat of the bird flu is on everyone's mind. Did you know that there's a bird flu summit coming in October? I mean, it's eerily reminiscent of Event 201 that foreshadowed the COVID pandemic. And get this, the first topic on the agenda is mass fatality management planning. So if that doesn't send chills down your spine, I don't know what will. But here's the good news. You don't have to be scared if you're prepared. The wellness company created a medical emergency kit, and every home in America should have at least one of these. They're packed with life-saving meds things I'm not allowed to talk about here on YouTube, but those medications that were demonized during the pandemic. They also have antibiotics like amoxicillin and even a Z-Pak, and it's all backed by experts like Dr. Peter McCullough. So imagine this, no more frantic searches for a doctor, no more emergency waiting rooms, just a few clicks, and this kit is delivered to your front door. And in times like these, having your medical emergency kit is not just a luxury, it's a necessity. So protect your family by preparing now. Head over to twc.health/Kim and use code Kim. Let me just go ahead and show this to you so that you guys, there it is. So you guys, the information is there for you. But I'm telling you what it is. twc.health/Kim. Use code Kim. Save $45. Don't wait until it's too late. Act now, take control, and ensure you're protected against whatever comes next. Again, that's twc.health/Kim. Use code Kim to save $45 plus free shipping right now. Hey guys, this was just a clip of a longer show. Catch the full show by going to KimIversonShow.com. It is free. It airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You could go back now and watch this full interview. I highly recommend it. Again, go to KimIversonShow.com. Thank you so much for watching.